La diffusion vient de démarrer. Tous les participants sont en mode écoute seule.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be connected again. Welcome to this regional orientation webinar for the UN Biodiversity Lab for the Asian region. This webinar is part of the 6NR technical webinar series. I am Marion Marigot, the technical specialist for the 6NR project and your facilitator for this webinar. I warmly welcome you to this webinar session. The countries invited to this regional virtual orientation workshop include Bangladesh, Bhutan, Cambodia, China, India, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Laos People's Democratic Republic, Malaysia, Maldives, Mongolia, Myanmar, Nepal, Pakistan, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Tajikistan, Thailand, Timor-Leste, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. This 2 hours webinar will provide the country in your region with a virtual orientation to the UN Biodiversity Lab. You will learn how the UN Biodiversity Lab can be used to support the preparation of a data-driven 6NR. You will receive an overview of how to analyze the country's national and global geospatial data to make assessments about progress to achieve several Aichi biodiversity targets, implement your NBSAP, and achieve expected conservation outcomes. You will also have the opportunity to interact with spatial data experts, 6NR specialists, and the UN Biodiversity Lab web development team. Welcome everyone, we're thrilled to have you here today. As usual in our session, I would like to remind you all of certain rules and dynamics in the webinar sessions. Microphones will be muted during the presentation. This reduces interferences and facilitates the communication. This 2 hours webinar will be divided into 2 sections. The first will discuss how spatial data can support conservation planning and reporting and provide you with an introduction to the UN Biodiversity Lab. The second section will introduce you to your country's private workspace on the UN Biodiversity Lab and show how this can be used to support your 6NR. Each section of today's webinar will be followed by a 20 to 30 minute question and answer session. Please send us in advance your question or raise your hand in the control panel of GoToWebinar. If you want to speak and the connection allows it, we will open your microphones during the Q&A session. As many of our participants are not English native speakers, and myself included, I would like to remind our speakers the importance of talking slowly. This fosters the comprehension among our practitioners around the world. This webinar is being entirely recorded and will be posted on the NBSAP Forum channel, YouTube channel. It will also be shared via email. And now I will transfer the webinar to our first presenter, Inga Perbenson, the Senior Advisor on MAPIX with UN Environment. I will provide an introduction to the importance of spatial data for conservation planning. Over to you, Inga.
Hello everyone, and good morning from Geneva, where the sun is shining and the sky is blue. It's very lovely. Thank you very much for this introduction, Marion. I want to start today with a brief introduction about the UN Biodiversity Lab and more generally the importance of data for nature and development. Just trying to, there we go. I hope you can all see the slides. So today we're really a world awash in data. 90% of the data for all human history was generated within only the last 2 years, and the pace of data continues to grow exponentially. We have satellite imagery for every corner of the Earth at 3-meter resolution on a daily basis. Scientists have mapped every single tree in 5 Amazonian countries. Despite this, the 4th Industrial Revolution has yet to make a serious mark in the field of biodiversity, and in particular, on the intersection of ecosystem services and human development. Last year, our colleagues at UNDP analyzed the maps from every post-2020 NBSAP and 5th national report, and the findings were quite startling. The average number of maps in the 5th national report was fewer than 5, and for NBSAPs, fewer than 4, and this includes a map of the country itself. Roughly a third of all NBSAPs had no maps at all. Furthermore, 80% of all national reports and 70% of all NBSAPs did not have maps to provide information to guide decision-making. Fewer than 4% of all maps focused on essential ecosystem services, and this only took place in a handful of countries. In December, we surveyed more than 70 GEF-eligible countries, and the findings confirmed what we had suspected. 4 out of every 5 parties identified specific data problems. These included, for example, silos between agencies, a lack of access to global and regional data sets, and challenges to access and use specialized software, and also, of course, limited server capacity, and some of you may have faced the same. This is not only unfortunate, but it's also dangerous, and let me explain a little bit why. Nature underpins our ability to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. If we don't know where our natural capital is and what it does for our well-being, communities and livelihood, then we have very little hope of tackling the development and climate challenges of the coming decade. Let me give you 3 specific examples. First, nature is essential to the livelihoods of the 80% of people on our planet who live on less than $10 a day. Agriculture sustains 1.3 billion livelihoods, forests another 1.6 billion livelihoods, and oceans another 1.6 billion. Therefore, 2 out of every 3 people on this planet directly depend on nature for their livelihoods. We also know from the Global Land Outlook that 1.3 billion people rely on degrading agricultural land, and at least 1/5 of all cropland globally is degraded, mostly in developing countries. The challenge for us as a conservation and development community is to answer the question, where are there opportunities to tackle poverty through regenerative agriculture and land restoration? For a second example, let's look at how nature is essential to water security. 3 out of every 4 people on the planet depend on forests for their drinking water. Yet we know from a recent World Resource Institute report that 2017 was the 2nd worst year for forest loss on record. We also know that 50% of global forest cover has been cleared or degraded. These types of activities raise the kind of drought we are starting to see in cities around the world, with estimates for day 0, such as in Cape Town, for example. On a positive note, a recent study by the Nature Conservancy found that more than 3,200 cities around the world could significantly improve their water security through forest restoration. The challenge again for us is to determine where we should focus our restoration efforts to improve water security. For a third example, let's consider how nature is essential to addressing climate change. We know from recent scientific studies that forests represent close to 40% of our climate mitigation solution. Therefore, we will not be able to come close to achieving our 2-degree goal, let alone our 1.5-degree goal, without forests. To achieve these goals, as conservation managers, we have to be able to answer the question, where exactly are the forests with high carbon stocks? How do they relate to existing forest concessions and forest protected areas? And where should we take specific forest action to have the biggest climate impact? To answer the questions raised in these 3 examples, we need spatial data sets, data on land cover, protected areas, carbon stocks, hydrosheds, poverty. To make more informed policy decisions on nature and development, we also need to analyze the results of intersecting multiple data sets. Through our work on the 6th National Report Project, we are finding powerful examples of how GEF-eligible countries are using spatial data to make more informed conservation decisions to advance NBSAP implementation and also facilitate the delivery of the Aichi Biodiversity Targets. I want to share a few stories of these achievements with you. Traveling around the world, let's first go to North America. In Mexico, the government is using spatial data to help implement COP13 decisions on how to mainstream biodiversity into the agricultural sector. Here, spatial data are providing key information to align policies on agricultural incentives with the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. The data are helping the government of Mexico to achieve ABT 3. To the south, in Ecuador, the government is using spatial data to tailor the extent and footprint of their protected area system to reflect ecosystem fragility and biodiversity. These data demonstrate important contributions to Aichi Biodiversity Target 15. Across the Atlantic, the South African government is using spatial data to select potential areas for the official designation of Marine Protected Area. This work is contributing to Aichi Biodiversity Target 6, among other targets. Finally, in Eastern Europe, Moldova is using spatial data to ensure the continued success of the Emerald Network and furthering the capacity of the government to monitor biodiversity and track changes over time. This work contributes to Aichi Biodiversity Target number 11. The accomplishments these parties are making illustrate the powerful role that spatial data can play in supporting the achievement of the Aichi Biodiversity Targets, the strategic plan, and the 2050 vision. In each of these cases, spatial analysis provided key quantitative data to assess the status of NBSAP implementation and biodiversity status and trends. However, through UNDP and UN Environment's work with 140 countries to prepare their NBSAPs and 6th National Report, we have come to recognize that parties' capacity to access and use spatial data is highly variable. Therefore, we created the UN Biodiversity Lab based on your feedback to enable parties to have better access to high-quality global spatial data and analysis tools, regardless of their internal GIS capacity or access to data. We see the UN Biodiversity Lab as a key tool to help you produce a high-quality, data-driven 6th National Report by the end of this year. This is very important. The 6th National Report must be complete by the end of 2018, and it must be data-driven, because these data will be used to determine the progress we're making as a global community to achieve the Aichi Biodiversity Target. They improve decision-making related to NBSAP implementation. They provide a baseline for current state of biodiversity around the world. They inform the 5th Global Biodiversity Outlook, and they contribute data and guide discussions on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Accurate data, which geospatial analysis facilitate, are critical to achieving these goals. Through this project, UNDP and UN Environment are engaging directly with each of you, a total of 140 governments, to prepare their 6th National Report. These interactions are allowing us to develop and update the spatial planning platform based on your actual user needs. The platform is managed through a committed partnership between the UNDP and UN Environment, with the support of the CBD Secretariat and funding from the GEF. Our technical partners, MapX, Grid Geneva, NASA, UN Environment World Conservation Monitoring Center, also bring very important expertise. We see this project as an important opportunity to build partnerships among data providers and data users. Working with you helps us to ensure that governments have access and the capacity to use cutting-edge spatial data to make important conservation and development decisions. We are so glad that you were able to join us, or that you have joined us, because we're only just beginning, for this regional orientation webinar. This webinar is part of a UN Biodiversity Lab training package offered as part of the 6th National Report technical webinar series. We will also have 3 in-depth technical trainings offered during September. With your registration for this webinar, you were automatically registered for the additional training webinars. On September 13th, for example, we will show you how to upload and work with national data sets. On September 18th, we will show you how to use spatial data and maps to make conservation decisions. Finally, on September 25th, we will show you how to use story maps to communicate the value of biodiversity. With this, I conclude my presentation, and the floor is back to you, Marion.
Thank you, Inga, for an insightful presentation. And in order to learn more about the data, the functionalities, and the services offered by UN Biodiversity Lab, I'd now like to present my colleague David Jensen, the head of Environmental Cooperation for Peace Building and the co-director of MapX UN Environment. David, I'm giving you the presenter rights, and it's over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Marianne, for the introduction, and a warm welcome to all our participants. I am going to get my slides started, so I just need a couple of seconds. So thank you very much again. Today, I'm really excited to provide you with an introduction to the UN Biodiversity Lab, the data available in the lab, and the types of analysis you can run to support the preparation of your 6th National Report and the implementation of your NBSAP. So in the first half of my presentation, I'll provide you with an overview of the 10 key features of the lab And in the second half of the presentation, I'll dive into some of the specific global data available and some of the analysis you can conduct. So with that opening, let's get started. So the mission of the Biodiversity Lab is threefold. First and foremost, we're aiming to build spatial literacy to enable better decision-making around biodiversity and conservation. Secondly, we are hoping to help countries use spatial data as a vehicle for improved transparency and accountability with respect to the achievement of the Aichi Biodiversity Targets. And third, we're hoping to help apply insights from spatial data across sectors to deliver on the actual Aichi Biodiversity Targets as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. So how do we aim to do this? Well, let's begin with 10 of the key features we offer through the Biodiversity Lab. So the first feature I want to emphasize is really important, and that is this is a free open source platform that does not require technical GIS expertise. Now, in our outreach to the various 6NR countries, we have heard from a number of countries two main challenges, as Inga mentioned. Some countries simply do not have the capacity to conduct GIS analysis or to access spatial data. And other countries do have the capacity to conduct analyses, but they lack the server space or they lack the ability to aggregate data in a single platform. So we created the UN Biodiversity Lab to address both of these challenges. The lab facilitates access to key global data layers hosted in the cloud, and it also provides server space for national data in a single secure platform. I also wanted to highlight that the platform is designed to be low bandwidth, meaning it can be used in a range of different internet connectivity conditions, which we know is important to many of the countries we work on in the 6th National Report Project. The second feature I want to highlight is that the UN Biodiversity Lab provides a one-stop shop for policymakers to access the best available spatial data on biodiversity, protected areas, threats, and the SDGs. The UN Biodiversity Lab currently has nearly 80 global data layers from over 40 different providers that were identified by our spatial data experts as the most essential data to support your 6th National Report and your National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. I will explain more about what these data layers are and how you can access them in the second half of this presentation. For now, I want to emphasize that all the data are carefully curated by our spatial data scientists to enable you to access key data sets either by theme or by Aichi Biodiversity Target. And you can see on the screen there, we have two different ways of navigating the data, either by Aichi Target or by theme. So each data set was assigned to one or more themes based on its area of relevance. For example, the ecoregions data layer is assigned to the biodiversity theme, while the above ground carbon biomass falls within the climate change and carbon theme. Similarly, the marine wilderness theme naturally falls within the marine theme. So each data set was also assigned to one or more of the biodiversity targets based either upon its status as an official indicator for that target or based on our spatial data experts' analysis of the layers that are most useful for reporting on a given Aichi Biodiversity Target. So when you enter the lab, we would suggest you start searching for data first within the Aichi Biodiversity Target of interest. And if you want to then look at different themes, you're welcome to go into the second part of the menus, which is by theme. Let me move on to the fourth key feature of the site. Now, we'd like to emphasize that for each of the data layers available on the UN Biodiversity Lab, we provide a UN verification of data integrity. All of the layers included in the Biodiversity Lab have been assessed using a dedicated data integrity assessment framework, which scores 4 key variables: data reliability, technical accessibility, data openness, and data sustainability. And based on these criteria, each data layer receives a ranking between 0 and 100, which can be viewed in the metadata of each set. This score gives you an indication of the overall integrity of that data set, and we'll be tracking the integrity over time to watch how it improves. Now, before any data is made publicly accessible in the data catalog, it is reviewed by our team of experts at UN Environment and UNDP. This ensures that all the data in the catalog has received a UN seal of approval. Moving on now to the fifth key feature, and this is a really important feature which has been requested by multiple countries. We have created inside the UN Biodiversity Lab a secure and private online workspace for each GEF eligible country working on the 6NR project. Inside the lab, you'll see this private workspace referred to as your national project. The national project is a secure and private online space that is pre-populated with all the relevant data sets from the Biodiversity Lab that can help support your preparation of the 6NR. We recognize that many countries may have better data available that you may prefer to use for your analysis. And to facilitate the use of national data, we provide unlimited server space for you to upload your data sets and intersect them with some of the global data sets. We also recognize that many countries are required to use only nationally verified data for your 6NR and your national biodiversity strategies and action plans. If you would like to use data available through the UN Biodiversity Lab, but need to ensure that it's nationally verified, we can work with you to facilitate this. Please contact the support email shown on the screen, and we can provide a customized letter by UNDP and UN Environment to contacts within the relevant ministries to facilitate this process. Now, your national project has unlimited storage space and the highest level of privacy assurances possible. We ensure the privacy of your data in two ways: server security and password protected national projects. Let me go through each of those. First of all the data you upload to the sites are stored on our secure servers located in Switzerland. Switzerland has the highest standards in the world for data security, protecting data owners against any undesirable access on the server side. Second, your national project space is protected on the UN Biodiversity Lab by restricted access to a specific group of users which you determine. Only these users will be able to see the data you upload. Access to the national project for your country is regulated by an administrator. For the 6NR project, each UNDP or UN Environment focal point has been added as an administrator for your country's national project, and administrators will be able to control who has access to your data, the data sets, etc., as well as invite new users and help conduct key analysis to generate maps. We'll talk more about how to access and customize your country's national project in the second hour of this webinar. So the next feature I'd like to highlight is that you can use the UN Biodiversity Lab to conduct key analyses for your national reporting in under 10 minutes. The UN Biodiversity Lab can be used to generate two main types of analyses. The first is the status of biodiversity in your country, and the second is analysis that identify actions that can be taken to enhance the implementation of national biodiversity strategies and action plans, as well as future conservation planning. I'll provide examples of these two types of analyses in the second half of this presentation. And as Inga mentioned, we'll also be hosting in-depth webinars on these types of analyses on September 13th and September 18th. Let's move on to the eighth feature. Once you've completed these analyses, you can export maps, data layers, and data sets for the 6th National Report and related analysis at the click of a button. You can see the supported export formats on this slide, which include several formats to enable analysis with desktop GIS, as well as PDF exports for maps that can be directly added into your 6th National Report. The ninth feature that I want to highlight here is that you can use the UN Biodiversity Lab to share best practices and conservation success stories using story maps. And we'll be sending around some links to story map examples at the end of the presentation. But story maps are basically a way to bring data to life, and they enable countries to communicate their successes to others in a high quality, visually appealing ways, which brings together maps, photos, videos into a single digital environment. Story maps can be shared on social media, they can be embedded in websites, and they can even be turned into automated videos. For instance, to help stakeholders get funding for future projects, or to encourage knowledge sharing within your ministry with high-level political figures. A webinar specifically on creating story maps to communicate the value of biodiversity will be held on September 25th. Now, finally, I want to highlight that the UN Biodiversity Lab is a co-designed space that will be refined based on your feedback and based on requests from parties to the Convention on Biodiversity. The current version of the site is a beta version, and we expect to go through several iterations as we work to include your feedback and to develop new features that better meet your needs. We see this as a co-design process with you, the users. We encourage you to write to the support email shown on the screen with any feedback or ideas. And users that are proficient in informatics can also submit requests to GitHub, where the UN Biodiversity Lab is managed. However, for general inquiries, we suggest sending an email to our support team, who can then decide the best way to address it. With this background, I'll move on now to give you a tour of some of the key data layers we offer and the analyses you can conduct for your 6NR and National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. So let's start out by dividing the data we have let's start out by diving into the data we have on the Biodiversity Lab. We currently have nearly 80 data layers, and we are continually adding new data. Please do contact us if you have data or are aware of data that we should be including on the Biodiversity Lab using the forms on the website and the email addresses. As I mentioned already, we select data for inclusion through a rigorous scientific process involving input and insight from conservationists and scientists around the world. All of the data that the UN Biodiversity Lab contains comes from partners who have provided the data after it has gone through a rigorous scientific review process and publication in some of the world's most high-impact scientific journals. Now, we'd be here all day if I had to go through all the data sets, so I'll just walk you through some of the highlights. We'll cover data from 4 broad categories: protected areas, biodiversity, threats, and SDG data. Now, let's start out with data on the protected area estate. We can't really talk about conservation without mentioning the main tool policymakers reach for, protected areas. So let's go through a few of our key protected area data layers. Now, the World Database on Protected Areas is the largest database of protected areas on the planet. The data there include are the legally defined protected area borders as reported to them by governments for both marine and terrestrial areas. Now, the Biodiversity Lab pulls the data directly from the World Conservation Monitoring Center. So the data in the UN Biodiversity Lab is constantly updated when the World Database on Protected Areas is updated every month. We also have data from an analysis recently published in the Journal of Science that provides an estimate of the management effectiveness of protected areas globally. Here, this data represents the percentage of a protected area that is under intense human pressure. We have data published in 2017 by scientists at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission that has analyzed how well connected the protected area estate is within ecoregions globally. For those of you familiar with this data, you may know it is called the Protected Connected Data Set. This data is directly related to Aichi Biodiversity Target 11. Let's move on to a few of our key biodiversity data layers, both marine and terrestrial. We, of course, include the terrestrial ecoregions of the world, and note this is the update that was produced in 2017. This is one of the key data that is directly referred to in the specific Aichi Biodiversity Target protection commitments. We also include the IUCN Red List species range polygons. Also among these are several other derived products that include species richness data, seen here, threatened species richness, and metrics of range rarity, based on a measure of species endemism. To the left, we have data on globally defined wilderness areas, both on land and sea. Shown here is the marine data that was just published several weeks ago and received large media attention. Even The Economist picked it up. Wilderness is being recognized as a conservation target that deserves more attention. In the marine space, we have data on species richness, range rarity, and proportional range rarity that has been extracted from aquamaps, a tool used to generate large-scale predictions of natural occurrences of marine species. It is generally accepted that it can produce species distribution models for many more marine species. For example, in the case here, these maps are derived from 25,000 species. So let's move on now to a snapshot of the available data on threats to biodiversity. First, we have the Biodiversity Intactness Index. The Biodiversity Intactness Index shows the modeled average abundance of originally present species in a grid cell as a percentage relative to their abundance in an intact ecosystem. Now that's somewhat confusing, so in a simple way, it can be seen as a measure of how much humans have impacted on terrestrial biodiversity, or as a measure of how degraded biodiversity in an area actually is. We also have data on the cumulative human impact on terrestrial ecosystems, the human footprint, along with change maps of the human footprint from 1993. An updated version will be available in the near future. The human footprint is a global measure of human pressures on the landscape. In the marine realm, we have data on the cumulative change of human impacts, including shipping, pollution, runoff plumes, and other related data. And finally, let's talk a little bit about what we're calling SDG data on the Biodiversity Lab. This data can not only support your commitments to the Convention on Biodiversity, but can also show the connections between the Convention on Biodiversity and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Now here, a key component of this SDG data are socioeconomic data. And there are many socioeconomic data layers on the website, ranging from human population to predictions of urban expansion, livestock density, agricultural suitability and change, and shown here, access to cities in 2015. This data set was created to map human access to healthcare, and this data can help identify at-risk populations. But it can also be used to help mapping risks to resources, for example, where easy access to protected areas might have impacts on their management effectiveness. Also important for drawing connections to the SDGs are assessments of ecosystem services, such as carbon storage and sequestration. Now, we include several recently available data sets on carbon, including above ground forest biomass, globally shown here, soil carbon, both globally and within mangrove forests, and changes in carbon biomass. Now, I want to emphasize that the data sets I've shown here are only a sample of those on the UN Biodiversity Lab. And as I mentioned, we're working with data creators to incorporate more data in the near future. We're happy to walk you through the other data sets and show you how they can be used for your 6th National Report and National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan implementation. But access to these data is only the first step. It's how we use the data that is most important. The UN Biodiversity Lab was created to support you to use the data to complete the analysis needed to visualize and understand national progress, to report on 5 main Aichi biodiversity targets for which spatial data is available and essential. So these targets that the Biodiversity Lab focuses on are ABT 5, reducing rates of habitat loss, fragmentation, and degradation; ABT 11, meeting protected area coverage, representation, and connectivity targets; ABT 12, preventing extinction of threatened species; ABT 14, safeguarding and restoring important ecosystem services; and ABT 15, enhancing and restoring climate resilience into ecosystems. So you can use this platform to create status maps to demonstrate your party's progress on these 5 Aichi biodiversity targets for your 6th national report, as well to produce maps that can help inform decisions and actions to be taken in your national biodiversity strategy and action plan implementation and future conservation planning efforts. So let's look first at analyses that enable you to produce status maps that demonstrate your commitments and your progress on these 5 Aichi biodiversity targets. So first of all, analysis to create status maps. Several status maps can be produced using single data sources in the UN Biodiversity Lab, with aerial calculations and extraction of attribute values being done with just a few clicks of the mouse. On the following slides, we're going to go through some examples of the maps you can produce in the Biodiversity Lab with little or no effort required. First, Aichi Biodiversity Target 11. The objective is to answer the question, what is the current coverage and distribution of terrestrial protected areas? You can look at the data views of the World Database on Protected Areas, as well as the data set on Ramsar sites. And we can use the WDPA to show, as well as to calculate, both the total area of a country under some form of protection, or to calculate the proportion of the protected areas estate in the country by IUCN category or some other level of designation. If we look also at Aichi Biodiversity Target 11, and we ask the question, what is the current coverage and distribution of marine protected areas? We can look at, again, the WDPA, the World Database on Protected Areas, as well as data set on the exclusive economic zone. And similarly, the same target applies in the marine realms. We can use the exclusive economic zone data set to identify the total marine jurisdiction of a country, against which we can then measure the extent to which it has some level of protection, again, using the World Database on Protected Areas, where we can filter data for marine protected areas only. Still within Aichi Biodiversity Target 11, if we ask the question, what is the protection coverage of species richness data? We can look at 2 different data sets. We can look at the species richness, threatened richness, or range rarity data set from IUCN, and we can combine that with the World Database on Protected Areas. We may want to report on how well we are protecting the range and habitats for threatened species, as well as for accounting for the most threatened species, or of areas that have higher rates of endemism. They may be priority targets for us to consider further. Let's move on to the next question. What is the protection coverage of key connectivity areas across the landscape? Here we can look at the World Database on Protected Areas, as well as a database called the Protected Area Coverage and Connectivity. The Protected Area Coverage and Connectivity data that was shown before was produced specifically to begin to assess and report on ABT 11 and progress towards measuring connectivity. Here we can see across ecoregions alongside the World Database on Protected Area Coverage. So what is the status and distribution of protected area management effectiveness? Here we can look at the World Database on Protected Areas, as well as human pressures in protected areas. We can show a measure of management effectiveness across protected areas. Here we can see the proportion of each protected area that is under intense human pressure in Mexico, with a very visible broad range of values across the country. We may also want to include the IUCN Green List information The IUCN Green List being an effort to recognize those protected areas that are at the forefront of best practices in protected area management. So let's shift gears now and move to Aichi Biodiversity Target 12. The objective here would be to answer the question, what is the spatial coverage of threatened species within the affected protected areas network? Here we can look at 3 different data views: human pressures in protected areas, the IUCN Green List, and threatened species richness. We may equally want to know how effectively we are managing protected areas that protect threatened species, and we can do so by comparing the human pressure in protected areas data with threatened species richness. We may also be interested in how well we are doing on the management areas with highly range restricted species. Again, this is just a snapshot of readily producible maps in the UN Biodiversity Lab that indicate the status of progress towards the ABTs. We'll provide you with detailed training on how to create these status maps for your own country in the technical webinar on the 13th of September. So how do we go from maps showing the current state of our conservation assets to maps that can help inform decision makers to take action? Well, we use knowledge of where we are to guide us in terms of where we want to be. We identify gaps and shortcomings in our progress towards reaching conservation targets. We can then define actions to address those shortcomings. There's an entire field of scientific research called decision science that aims to provide methods to guide these decision-making processes. Some of you may be familiar with these, such as MARCSAM, zonation, cost-benefit analysis, and so on. Behind every possible action needs to be a clearly defined aim or target. For example, to protect threatened habitat is an ambiguous goal, whereas to attain 17% protection of all habitats is a specific target we can aim for. We aren't there yet with the integration and development of these more advanced tools, such as MARCSAM, but these methods are important. In many cases, a decision-making map is simply a follow-on to a map reporting on the status of a particular ABT target. For example, if 5 ecoregions in your country have met 17% of their protection targets, but 3 have 5% protection, then the action would simply be to identify how to increase protection for those 3 ecoregions. Similarly, if we aim to prevent the extinction of critically threatened species, we have found that 5% of a species range is protected, then the decision-making map would be to identify areas to increase protection of that species range, which for some range-restricted species, this may require protecting its entire range. Ultimately, not every country is going to have exactly the same actions they need to take, and they will need to produce different types of maps to guide their actions. In general, maps that assist decision-making will require overlaying several relevant data layers that cover and account for both benefit and cost information, and this is true within the Biodiversity Lab. On this slide, you can see a list of the key maps that UN Biodiversity Lab can assist you in making to help inform conservation actions. We'll show you how to create many of these maps in the technical webinar on 18 September, but for now, we can provide this detailed list. I have come to the end of my presentation because we are short on time, so I'm going to end it here and send it back to the webinar facilitator to lead a question and answer session. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, David. Yes, we're running out of time a bit and we have a bit more to present, but we will share this presentation, and of course, David and other experts will be available to answer any questions that you may have in terms of using the maps for focusing on some of the Aichi biodiversity targets. So thank you, David, for this presentation, and thank you, Inga, for the presentation before on showing the importance of spatial data of nature development and using the UN Bio Lab. I would like now to invite our webinar's attendees to share their questions and comments in the question box or press raise your hand button to participate to the Q&A session. You can use the control panel of GoToWebinar platform. We can open your microphone or read your question depending on your preference. I certainly encourage you all to participate as this is This is the time to meet the expert and ask your questions that you may have right now. I actually see that we have a raised hand by Osama El Siddig. Osama, I see your hand, and so I'm going to open your microphone and see if we can hear you. Can you hear us? And can you speak? Osama, I'm not sure you can hear us. So it doesn't seem that you can talk back, you can speak back and answer and ask your question, but maybe you can type your question in the control panel and I can read it out loud. I see we have received one question. So Ghulam Salwar is asking, I guess, do we have data at 3-meter resolution for all the countries? So that may be a question for maybe David.
Sure, I can answer that very easily. No, we don't have data at 3-meter resolution for all the countries. That would be incredible to have. That is a data set that is managed by a company called Planet Labs, based out of the US. They control a system of satellites called Dove satellites. There's about 179 of these Dove satellites, and they're the ones collecting this this data on a daily basis at 3-meter resolution. We would love to have access to that data, but they're a commercial company, and at the moment they are charging for access. However, we're talking with Planet Labs about some kind of cooperation where we could get some of that data, especially for key biodiversity areas that could be useful to countries. So we don't currently have it, but we would like to get it, and we're having that discussion on an ongoing basis to see what portion of it we could potentially incorporate into the lab.
Thanks, David. I have another question. I see Tung Dao has the raise hand. Tung, I'm going to activate your microphone. Can you hear us? Can you speak?
Yes, I can speak.
Perfect.
I have two questions. One question is about the resolution and level of focus that you can create for a country. If you can create at level of national level or provincial level or at community level, I'm talking about a map. The second question is about Biodiversity Lab. How do I invite my national experts and other colleagues from the country to this lab? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's also be answered by David.
I can answer both of those questions. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, the lab has been designed to store, aggregate, and analyze data at all those scales you mentioned. So at the moment, because many of the data sets are global, the data we have is suitable for a national resolution. But if you upload additional data, either at the provincial level or community level, the lab can handle and move between those scales. So certainly we designed it to be very flexible and to move between local, national, global resolutions and scales. In terms of the inviting data sets, or sorry, in terms of inviting collaborators, what we will be doing is we'll be nominating an administrator for each country, and we'll be providing training to that administrator in terms of how that person can then invite other colleagues into the national project space. So that is to come in one of the future webinars.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Tung. I think we do have a lot of questions here. There is one from Ghulam Salwar asking, what is the resolution of the data you're providing, especially for Bangladesh? If you have it in mind, David?
Well, there are over 80 data sets in the lab at the moment, and they have variable resolutions. So it's hard to provide a single answer. What I would suggest is we go into the Bangladesh national project and have a look at the different sets and see if they're meeting your needs, and if not, let us know, and let us know if there are specific requests you would have, and we can have a look to see where we might be able to acquire higher resolution data. So at the moment, I would say that the data itself is most suitable at the national resolution. As I said, these are global data sets that we're we're offering, and the national level is the best resolution. But in some cases, we actually have lower or higher level resolution. If we've been working in countries previously, for example, Afghanistan or DR Congo or other countries where we've been deploying some of these tools, we may have higher resolution data. So I would say, again, go into your national sandbox, have a look, and then get back to us with a reaction and any data sets you feel are missing that could be useful.
Exactly. In terms of following up with the countries for your own data, please feel free to contact us, and we can discuss in more focus on your own country and data available for your country. We have another question from Dan Yu that is asking, at present, the status map that can be produced on the Aichi Biodiversity Targets indicators, is that covering all the countries or just some countries?
At the moment, it should be covering all countries because the global sets, I mean, the global data sets are inclusive of all the countries, the 150 countries that we're providing support to. So it should be relative to all countries. It's not selective.
Thank you. And Sophia Chin is asking if it's possible to use my own country data.
Yes, absolutely. This is a fantastic question, and this is exactly one of the motivators for building the lab, was to enable countries to mix global data with national data into a single environment. And that's exactly what you can do in this project workspace, in this national project workspace. The national project workspace offers you all the global data for your country, but it enables you to also upload your national data into that private, secure space, so that you can then analyze global data together with national data in a single environment, generate an outcome map, and then export it and incorporate it into your 6th national report. So absolutely, this is one of the feature requests we had right from the start, and this is one of the core driving motivators for the lab, was to actually offer that. As I mentioned in my presentation, it's a cloud server based in Geneva. It's very secure. And it's at the moment unlimited server space for holding national data.
Thank you, David.
If you upload national data, as I mentioned, the administrator that you determine manages your national workspace, that person, he or she, will control who can access that data, who can see it, and how that data is potentially made public or not. If you upload national data, it can remain completely private. It doesn't need to be published ever. But that's a decision that each country takes, and that's a decision that is managed by the national project administrator.
Exactly, and one of the technical webinars upcoming in September will actually focus on uploading and using your own national data to complete the tool. I see we have one question from Wilailak, and the hand is raised, so that means Wilailak may ask the question himself. So do you hear us, and can you ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yes, my question is, if we would like to download the or export the map, do we need the specific software or the big capacity of our computer?
That's a great question. Thank you. No, you don't need any specific additional software. You can either download the maps as shapefiles or GeoJSON files, or as image files or PDFs. So we offer different choices. If you have your own GIS software and you want to, download the actual shapefiles, we can permit you to do that. If you do not have your own GIS software and you simply want to download the maps, the final map products, you can do that as well. So we give you full flexibility in terms of how you want to download maps. The one caveat I will say is that some of the data layers, each data custodian determines how they want their data to be available for downloading. And some data custodians only want us to allow users to visualize data but not download, and some allow full downloads. So the raw data cannot always be downloaded from every provider. It's really on a case-by-case basis. But you can always take a screenshot of a map and or download a PDF of a map to incorporate in your national report.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Thanks, David, for providing the answer. We have a question from Golkar that is sending his question from Uzbekistan UNDP. The question is, if national data of Uzbekistan is uploaded, can we assume that this data can be used by all globally?
Great question. No, it will not be used globally or by anybody else unless you decide to do so. So basically, if you upload national data and you want to publish it in the UN Biodiversity Lab, you need to go through a publication process where that data set needs to be peer reviewed by us, by our spatial data scientists. It needs to go through the data integrity verification process, and only after it goes through those two steps could it be potentially published and made public. But the default is that if you upload national data, it stays private. It stays inside your national sandbox, managed by your administrator, and it only goes public if you choose to do so.
Great. We also have another question from Golam on uploading the data. What is the data property, projection, etc., required for data upload?
Antonio, can you come in and answer that question, please?
So Antonio is our technical expert. Yeah, hi, Antonio.
Can you please repeat? Sorry, I couldn't really hear.
Of course. The question is, what is the data property, the projection, etc., required for data upload?
Yes, okay. Thanks for the question. Actually, it's very easy. Data can be uploaded with the WGS84 projection. So everything with that coordinate projection system can be uploaded.
Great. I hope that answered your question. Thanks, Antonio, for jumping in. I see we have another hand raised by Rahmat. I'm going to open your microphone. Can you hear us and ask your question? Oh, I see. I'm not sure you can actually hear us or speak. I don't think the microphone is working, Rahmat. So would you mind actually typing your question in the box, and I will read it out loud. The microphone doesn't seem working on your side. Sorry about this. We have a couple of other questions, actually. Thank you all for participating and sharing thoughts. We have Jin-Young Nam that is asking, can we access or exercise the list of actions you presented in your last slide of the presentation before the technical webinar on 13 September?
Yes, as far as I know, all of those are already in the lab. Maybe Antonio, do you want to re-verify?
Yes, I will.
Can you see my screen again, Marion?
Not yet. Actually, let me give you the authorization to share your screen again. We have a bit of time. Yep. You should have the authorization to share your screen now, David.
Right. So this is the list that the question was requesting. Do we now have the maps for each of these bullets that can be viewed in the lab? My understanding is we do. I just want to know, Antonio, if you could verify that.
Yeah, I'm actually verifying. It takes a little time, I guess, because I haven't produced them, but I'll make it fast.
So we'll come back on this towards the end of the webinar, but if all of these are not yet in the system, they should be in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, but it's Scott providing them. So actually, I do what he sent me, and I'm always publishing everything within the day, but as soon as I have them.
Yeah, what we'd like to do is to, once we get countries on board and starting to engage with the data, we'd like to create a mailing list so that we can keep everybody updated on the new data sets that are being added and the new kinds of analyses that are available. So we would like to put something together where every 2 weeks we send out an update and we allow countries to sort of get a sense of what's been added, and then what are the new features and functions, and then what are the new kind of analytics you can do. So that should be also coming mid-September.
Thank you, David and Antonio. Thanks for that. I have actually a couple of other questions. I'm going to switch back to Marion for presenter. Yep. Okay, and then I received a few questions. The first one is from, so we responded to this one, and then we have Neam thanking us for the webinar and asking, the data available on the Biodiversity Lab is collected from countries' available data and national information, or collected from other resources? And is the data available on the Biodiversity Lab sufficient for each country? From Iraq.
I mean, it's a combination of sources. By and large, they're global data sets that countries have already contributed to. For example, the World Database on Protected Areas. That's a global data set managed by the World Conservation Monitoring Center. But that data has all of the formal registered protected area boundaries for every country in the world in it. So that's a nationally driven process that is where national data feeds into that global data set, and it's an official global data set for all world protected areas. So that's one example. Some of the other data sets are academic analyses that have been conducted by some of the leading universities around the world. But the thing that unites all the data right now is it's all global data. So it's available for the entire world, for all the countries reporting to the Convention on Biodiversity. We have not yet started collecting detailed national data from different ministries and from different collaborators in each country. But that's what we're hoping the Biodiversity Lab offers, is the chance to collect national level data with our focal points for the CBD. So we can bring, as I mentioned, we can bring the global data sets and national data sets together within one common workspace, and then analyze them and produce the relevant status maps for the 6th National Report.
Nian, I hope we answered your question. Thank you, David. I have one last question now from Sakyam. Any link between the data spreadsheet and the spatial map, especially the national contribution to the Aichi Biodiversity Targets? And if I follow actually the conversation we had, Seyhan, I think you are mentioning the spreadsheet, the data spreadsheet. That is the data tracking tool that we have developed at UNDP and UN Environment together with the CBD to keep track of the advancement of the 6NR. I assume this is what you're talking about. David, are you familiar with the data tracking tool at all?
I have seen the data tracking tool, but I didn't quite understand the question.
So I think Seyhan is asking the link that existed between the data tracking tool for the 6NR project and the spatial maps. So can you respond on this question?
Yeah, going forward, we hope to make that link more explicit. It's not as explicit as it could be, but we're working to revise the data tracking tool and to make a more explicit connection between the two. So that's certainly within our planning framework.
Thank you. And in the meantime, for using this data spreadsheet, if you're really using it and you want to integrate spatial data, you can also modify your own data tracking tool at the national level and let us know, because you may actually visualize the most efficient way to modify it from a national perspective, and then we can adapt that and advise other countries to do so if they want to integrate those spatial data into the data tracking tool. I hope, Seyhan, this answer your question.
Marion, can I just jump in? What's really important is that we get your feedback on what kind of tools you need to actually do the 6th National Report, and how we can best support that with spatial data. So this is really only going to be successful if we get your feedback. As critical as it may be, we need to hear that feedback, and we need to basically iterate this. As I said, this is a beta. This is a beta platform, and we intend to improve it as we get feedback. We have 150 clients, 150 countries that we're trying to support. And so any feedback that you can send us about how we can make this as useful as possible for you, we need to hear that. So please do send us, as I said, to the email address, the support email address, or if you're technically savvy, you can jump into GitHub and begin to actually look at the GitHub repository. You can download the code if you want to. But more importantly, you can see the process for requesting features, and you can see all the people that are involved in the back-end development, and you can see how the work plan is going forward in terms of new features and functions that we're trying to build into the lab. So again, we really, this is going to be successful as a joint partnership and where we get as much feedback as possible.
Perfect. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you everyone who contributed to the discussion. We're gonna move forward as we have more to introduce about the Biodiversity Lab. We're now gonna focus in more details on how the UN Biodiversity Lab can support you to produce the 6NR and to support the implementation of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And to do so, I'm turning over Marion Planck, who is a research assistant for MAPEX with UN Environment. She will introduce you to the national projects within the UN Biodiversity Lab and show you how you can customize the project to support the development of your 6NR. This second hour will again conclude with a Q&A session. So if you have more questions, keep them and share them with us in a couple of minutes. Marion, over to you.
Hello, everyone. In this final presentation, I would like to provide you with an introduction to how to access your national project in the UN Biodiversity Lab. I heard that there were some questions related to that, and how to control the access and how to perform basic functions. So this introduction will be presented with a GIF presentation that you should start seeing right now. The GIF are animated images, and all of which will be available for download as a PowerPoint presentation after the webinar. So let's start out with the basics of registering and logging on the UN Biodiversity Lab. You can see on this slide the homepage for the UN Biodiversity Lab, accessible at www.unbiodiversitylab.org. Please note that when accessing the site with a Mac computer or devices running iOS, you may experience some bugs with the Chrome or Firefox browsers, so we recommend using Safari on Mac computers while we work on fixing this. For Windows, there is no preferred browser. The only requirement is that HTML5 is supported by the browser. So any version of modern browsers, including Microsoft Edge, Chrome, or Firefox, will work well. So to register or to log in for the UN Biodiversity Lab, you'll have to click the button that you see on the screen and enter your email. If you're an administrator, you must enter your email address that you have associated with your project. Then you will receive a one-time use code via email. To keep your information secure, you will always log into the UN Biodiversity Lab using this randomly generated one-time code. You should receive an email straight away from the MAPEX bot. And if you don't receive it within a few minutes, you just have to check the spam folder of your email. Once you receive the code, just enter it into the website and you're officially logged in the platform. Each time you will enter the platform, you can click the icon to see if you're still logged in to your user account. But you may need to re-enter your email and generate a unique login as well. Be sure you always provide the same email in order to access your project, because this is the email address you will be registered with. So now you know how to log in. Let's learn how to access your private national workspace or project on the UN Biodiversity Lab. So what you have to do is to navigate to the My Project button in the UN Biodiversity Lab. And when you click on My Project tab, you will be directed to a list of projects within the UN Biodiversity Lab. Any project you're a member of will show up at the top of this list. If you're not associated with the 6NR, you can still use several functions of the UN Biodiversity Lab, including downloading source data or generating maps. So please note that at this time, we're only offering the national project feature to teams associated with the 6NR reporting. If you are working on the 6NR, we've already created a national project for you that is pre-populated with relevant data layers. For ease, the UNDP or UN Environment 6NR focal point for each country has automatically been designated as the national project administrator of the project in the UN Biodiversity Lab. If you're the UNDP or UN Environment 6NR focal point for your country, and if you are not gotten access to your national project, please contact us after the webinar with a support address or directly. If you are working on your country's 6NR, but if you are not the focal point, you can easily join your national project. You can search through the projects by typing the name of a country and then just request to join them. This will send an email to the administrator of the project. And so it's important to consider who on your team should be the project administrator, because that person will have privileges in the project. Every national project needs to have one assigned administrator. The administrator will maintain access rights to the project and will be also responsible for both providing access to the other users and delegating the role of those users in the project. The administrator should preferably have some basic working knowledge and understanding of the Geographical Information System, called GIS, softwares and spatial data. However, they do not need to be GIS expert by any means, just to have some basic knowledge. As noted previously, for the 6NR projects, the UNDP or UN Environment 6NR focal point have been designated as the administrator for each country's project. If the 6NR is not the best person to be the administrator of your project, don't worry, we can easily add another member of your team to be the administrator as well. If you need some help identifying the best administrator for your project, feel free to contact us at support@unbiodiversitylab.org after this webinar for advice, and we'll share the support email address later. Concerning the roles and responsibilities of the administrator is basically the manager of your project. Only the administrator can decide who is given access to the project and what those users can do within the project. For example, some users may be allowed to view data in the project, while other users may be allowed to upload and do analysis. The administrator alone can decide to invite external users to the project, or also to remove them. Aside from providing the user access rights, the administrator is also in charge of configuring the project. They can modify parameters such as the abstract, the map position, etc. They can also delete the project completely. So to configure your project, you have to navigate through the toolbox, as you can see on the screen, and go to project configuration. Here you can set the description and initial position of your map of your project. Please be sure that you do not change your project title, as it is very essential that it stays the same to ensure that you can easily access it with. At the bottom of this window, as you can see, there's a checkbox which denotes whether your project will be public or not. If your project is public, it can be searched in the list of projects and other users can ask to become a member of it. If you want your project to remain private, please leave this box unchecked. However, remember that within a public project, you can publish data that will only be visible to the members of the project unless you specifically state that the data can be read by public users. To invite people to collaborate in your project, and there was a question a bit earlier about that, just select the Invite a New Member button in the configuration. Enter the emails of the people you would like to extend an invitation to, and they will receive the link immediately. As people can ask to become members of the project, the administrator can receive requests of membership by email. So please check if the person can be granted access to your project, and if so, you can just accept his request by clicking on the link in the email that you've received. If you receive an invite to a project, the link will direct you to MapX. To access your project within the UN Biodiversity Lab, you can simply navigate back to the My Project link on the platform. Earlier, I mentioned that users can have different roles inside the project. Indeed, you can define the roles of each project members on defined roles. Only the administrator can define the role of all the members. And members will include everyone in the project that can see or use the data. Members with publisher privileges can publish source layers and views for all members and can edit views that are available for publisher privileges. Administrators have the same authority as publisher and can also change the status of other accounts and delete the project entirely, as I was saying a bit earlier. If you're interested in contributing data to be published for use in the UN Biodiversity Lab, we would really love to hear from you. So please follow the link on our FAQ to submit our data submission form, or just contact us directly at support@unbiodiversitylab.org. So congratulations, now you know the basics of managing a project on the UN Biodiversity Lab. Once you have your project, you will want to know maybe a little bit more about the types of data you can add and the tools you can access. So let's start out by discussing the types of data available in the UN Biodiversity Lab. The UN Biodiversity Lab handles two types of spatial data, vector data and raster data. Concerning vector data, you can broadly think of vector data as data that represent linear or area features on a map, such as roads, highway, which are lines, or cities, which are points, or species range maps, which are polygons. Vector data will normally contain not just a feature on a map, but will also have other data associated with it, called attribute data. Attributes can be many things. It can be place names, it can be the area of a feature, or other calculated or derived data that is associated with the feature. So for example, on the screen, for each feature in the ecoregion 2017 dataset in the UN Biodiversity Lab, there's an attribute for that feature's ecoregion. Find a scale of land classification, as well as its biome. It's a more general land classification. For raster data, however, you can broadly thought of as data that represent things that exist on a range of values across space, such as maps of temperature, of land cover, of population density, or the percent of canopy closure in a forest. The attribute of raster data is a value within a pixel, or in a grid cell, that can represent categorical values, such as land cover classification, or continuous values, such as elevation. So within the UN Biodiversity Lab, users are able to make maps using both types of data. However, at present, users can only carry out analysis and query data by attribute on vector data types only. So for now, what you need to know is that raster data has the purple buttons, as you can see on the screen, and vector data have green buttons. The red buttons that you see now indicate a dataset that is being accessed in the UN Biodiversity Lab from another external web-hosted spatial database, such as the World Database on Protected Areas. So let's now explore key tools and functions available on the UN Biodiversity Lab. Datasets are organized thematically in the UN Biodiversity Lab on two ways. First, by relevance to reporting on an Aichi Biodiversity Target, and second, by general theme of the dataset. General themes available include the biodiversity, climate and carbon, ecosystem services, human impact, land cover, marine, natural hazards, protected areas, restoration, and socio-economic. And the ABT's targets mentioned include the ABT 5, 11, 12, 14, and 15. And you can see all those ABT biodiversity targets and the themes on the screen right now. So just for your information, for the moment, we have assigned themes to each dataset based on our best judgment of their primary theme among the UN Biodiversity Lab themes mentioned above, both generally and within the context of reporting on the ABTs. You may indeed find that datasets may help you in reporting in different ways that you have tagged them. And in fact, it is our hope that you find novel uses for the data that really can assist you in your national reporting. So we really encourage you to look beyond just the ABT themes when searching datasets, but also to explore other thematic areas as well. So to activate a dataset, you just have to turn on a particular theme or target of your choice by clicking on the associated switch in the left panel. You will then see a list of views that are related to that theme or target. Just click on the button beside it to activate the view, as shown on screen. To view a map in full screen, you can just experiment with clicking one of those buttons. There are several methods to filter your views or search for a particular dataset. You can order the selected views by title or date, or search by keyword as well. So clicking the Filter Activated Views button will remove all the views from the list, except for the ones that you have selected, as you can see right now on the screen. You can also click down here to filter views. by components, meaning by type of view, by classes, meaning by keyword, or by collection, which are the themes and other tags according to which each view is associated with. To look at views in a certain order, you can use the arrows in the view toolbar located beneath the legend in each view. Just click on Filter Activated Views for simplicity so that only the views that we have currently selected are available in the legend. The arrows will move up each view up or down according to your selection. So to conduct analysis within your project, you will first need to add data. For the 6 national projects, we have already done that for you. Your workspace will contain up to 50 different datasets, including the WPD, human footprint, IUCN and red list species, range data, various datasets on carbon, global forest data, Alliance for Zero Extinction Sites, ecoregions, and various socioeconomic data, among others. Also, please note that not all data may be populated in your country, as not all data cover all the countries. For example, a mangrove dataset does not occur in Kyrgyzstan. And here on the screen, and in the background, you can see an example in the project of Afghanistan pre-populated with multiple datasets. So maybe you will have some data in your project that you're not necessarily interested in. So to delete unnecessary external views from the project, just navigate back to the toolbox. There are several items in here which we'll cover in further details in the webinar on September 13th on uploading and working with national datasets. Today, we'll just show you how to review views that you do not want in your project. So click on Manage External Views, as you can see. Find the title of the view that you would like to remove and click on the small X. This will remove it from your workspace. If you accidentally delete an external view and you would like still see it in your workspace, you can easily re-add it by finding the view in the main data catalog and clicking on the Share button beneath the view. Enter the name of your project here. It should automatically appear underneath the input. When you click the Add the View to Selected Project button, a save icon will appear, signifying that it is now available in your project. In addition to adding data to your project, you can also share certain views and collections with colleagues. Collections refer to predefined themes that the view is part of. For example, each Aichi Biodiversity Target has a theme that you can select. You can choose to either generate a direct link or to embed the view or collection in a website or in a blog if necessary. Note that if you're trying to share a view from a private project to someone who has not been added as a member of your project, it will not be visible. You can also download data that were published in vector format from the UN Biodiversity Lab for use in desktop GIS programs, as David was mentioning earlier. You can download data in several different formats for use in your own programs, including S3 shapefiles, GeoPackage, GeoJSON, and KML. You can choose to clip this data to a certain country as well. It will automatically select all the features contained or touching the borders of the country of your choice. As for now, in order to really clip the data by the country borders and also to delete everything that is outside the borders, the users will have to do this outside MapX and the BioLab in a separate GIS software. Please note that not all views are available for download. As David was mentioning earlier, some are protected under view-only license, and also only vector data can currently be downloaded. Raster views will soon be available for download too. You will receive an email with a link of your data once the download has finished. And finally, note that you cannot download any data if you're not logged in the platform. So just be sure and ensure that you're logged in. The final element I would like to introduce today is how to generate maps and to download maps from the UN Biodiversity Lab. Making maps is a critical element for you for using the UN Biodiversity Lab, and it can be done in 2 ways. First, clicking the Take a Screenshot button will automatically begin a download of zip file to your computer. The zip file will contain 4 elements, 3 PNGs with the scale, the map, and the legend, and 1 PDF with all of the elements combined. If you cannot see the file at the bottom of your browser, just check the download folder of your computer. And the PDF output will look like this. The visual elements are still in development, so if the output is not of your liking, we recommend arranging the elements yourself. So to do so, you can use a program such as PowerPoint to arrange the elements for inclusion into reports or publication. If you would simply like to take a screenshot of the view with no auxiliary information, you can just click the print button along the top toolbar, and you will automatically download a picture of just what is shown on the screen, as you can see. So today I've provided you with a brief overview to get you started on the UN Biodiversity Lab, but there's much more to learn about this platform. So be sure to join for our webinars in September on uploading and analyzing national data for your 6NR, using spatial data and maps to make conservation decisions, and using star maps to communicate the value of biodiversity. Thank you very much. Over to you, Marion.
Thank you, Marion, for the presentation and for providing a really concrete picture of how the parties can begin to use the UN Biodiversity Lab for preparing their 6NR. And so now I would like to open again a question and answer sessions. We have 20 minutes to address your questions and to maybe exchange comments. I don't think I have any questions so far. You can so ask questions to our technical team on the presentation that Marion just did, but you can also ask questions on the project and the UN Biodiversity Lab more generally, as we started doing it in the first Q&A session. It's actually the moment to ask any technical questions that you may have, since you have the experts online. Is there anything I could ask?
Marianne, can I ask a question? This is David.
Yeah.
Can you explain to our colleagues when the email will go out in terms of nominating their national administrators?
Sure. Actually, that's also on Antonio's side. I think we have already nominated the administrators. Antonio, could you confirm?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yes, sure. Actually, I've been provided with a list of all the administrators, of all the focal points for all national projects, and I actually sent a membership request to all of you in order to be added as an administrator of your national project. You just have to confirm, to accept the request of membership. Currently, I just received a few acceptations, so I could upgrade the level of only few members as administrators of their national workspace. But please check your emails and accept my request of membership in order to become administrator.
If some of you have not received this email, maybe we can, check the spam folder. It can always happen that the email is sent there. And also you can contact us as the 6NR project team. Most of you are actually working with us already, I can see on the list. And so you can send us an email, and in the subject, please precise what country you work with. And say that you have not received this email to be the focal point and the administrator of the project, and we'll make sure that we send you an email again, and we rectify any mistake that could have been made on our side. It's important that you verify this email and let us know if you have not received it. Thank you, Antonio, and thanks, David, for the question.
And just to clarify, even if you are not the administrator for your national project, you can still access all the data. As Marianne showed you, you can search for your national project and then ask to be added, and that email will go to the administrator, and then you should be added, and then you can have a conversation with the administrator in terms of your access and status rights in the actual national sandbox. I also wanted to clarify that there can actually be more than one administrator. We don't recommend it, but if you want to have multiple administrators, that's also possible.
Thank you. We have one question that was sent by Jinyoung Nam. Is asking us, can you show us how to show two data view by time series? I wonder if we could share a screen actually. Marianne or David, do you think you could do that?
I can share my screen. Just to confirm, are we talking about time slider views or time series? Maybe that's a question for David, just to precise.
I think the best thing to do would be to show, for example, the time slider in a country like Somalia, where we have the temporal data on conflict. Can you show that on your screen?
Yes, of course, but that will be shown from the MapX platform only and not the UN Biodiversity Lab, if this is fine.
Do we have time series, time slider data on biodiversity that we could show?
Antonio, could you please
no, sorry, but there are not currently, because we don't have anything that can be used in that way that really has the features to be used with the time. But I can actually share my screen and show you something related to this that we have in other projects.
Yes,
please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sharing your screen.
Okay, thanks. Okay, can you see?
Yep.
You can see the data sets here in Somalia, isn't it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So this is a data set of vector format. So as you see, it's a green circle, and it can be navigated filtering by time. As you can see here, there is a button under the view, which is called setting. Settings open three potential tools to filter the data, and one of these is filter by date. And as you can see here, I can reduce the amount of time according to which the data should be shown. And as you see on map, the data are disappearing and reappearing. And we have more of this. As you can see exactly here in Somalia. I think webinar is a bit too demanding, but as you see, you can make the data disappearing and reappearing. So this is the way it works, and it can also work this way. You can select a time frame of, let's say, 2 years, and then move and see how it evolves within the 2 years time frame across the time.
Thank you very much, Antonio.
Antonio, while your screen is on, why don't you also just show, in terms of the legend, how the legends offer direct filtering for different classes?
Sure, I'll do it with okay. So as you can see here, we have the possibility to filter according to a legend. Here we have basin 1. So if you just click on one entry in the legend, this will be on the only item, the only value that can be shown on map. You can add more. This is very easy. This is just all. So I guess there are more types. This is just all. So when it's all, it means all the data will be shown together. Here it's about flood events. You can see I'm only selecting medium, only selecting lows, which are here, or very high. So in this case, you make a simple filter within the legend. This you can only do it with vector layers because they are interactive, while raster data, as Marion explained, can't be queried within the legend. So here you can visualize it better, but it's not interactive because these are pixel values within the map.
Thanks very much, Antonio.
Thank you. I hope this answered your question. Thanks a lot. Jin-Young, I hope this answered your question. If you have any other, please feel free to ask us. Antonio, I'm going to stop sharing your screen and bring back to the other Mario.
Wait a sec. Sorry, one other point, just while we have the screen open.
Sure.
One of the features we're building at the moment is the ability to show dashboards of data. So rather than having to do that time slider, we wanted to incorporate the ability to have graphs of different data points over time. Antonio, do you have, for example, some of the work we're looking at in Iraq where you could show the changes in the marshlands over a time series, just to show a dashboard?
Okay, let me get in it. Do you have something specific you want to have, like marshlands?
Just to show that, the dashboard, just to show that we're working on developing dashboards which are interactive, which can show data over time.
Yes, so this is something that is a supplementary information and complementary information to what is already shown on map, and can be associated to a specific layer, a specific view. As you can see here, the dashboard appears if I click on this, and the dashboards provide specific information that are shown by clicking on specific polygons. You see, if I click on a specific polygon, I get specific information because this dashboard was created. And these dashboards can be created for every layer, and of course, every layer will have different ones according to the information that is actually provided within the shapefile. In order to find which layers are provided with the dashboard within the filter, you can actually just select dashboard, and this will filter all the available views according to whether they have or not a dashboard.
Thanks very much.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
However, this is MAPEX, right? This is not directly on the UN Biodiversity Lab website, is it?
Yes, this is MAPEX, and because we have multiple projects that are not only related to UN Biodiversity Lab, and so we can actually show all the potential data that we can also have in the UN Biodiversity Lab. It's just a matter of finding a data that can be developed this way, and it can be done, and it can be incorporated in UN Biodiversity Lab as well.
I just wanted to make sure we don't confuse our participants, and so
yeah, sure.
I see that Jin-Young has actually sent another question in the meantime, asking, can we implement this feature that you showed into your own sandbox project, into our own sandbox project, sorry. So implement this feature that you're displaying into the project of each country.
Yes, if I can answer this question. So in your national project, you have you'll have people that will be in charge of publishing national data, and therefore whatever actually these people will publish can be actually developed up to the level you wish. So if a vector data is published, if a shapefile is published in your national project at your national level, these file here, this layer can be incorporated with the dashboard. It's just a matter of having people with informatics skills that can do it, or we can do it for you. It's a matter of you need to ask for the service, and we can actually put our developer providing this service for you.
Thank you. I hope we answered your questions. We have Golan, who has asked who becomes an administrator, someone from the ministry or from UNDP? I can answer that. So far, we have shared the list of the UNDP country office focal points for the 6NR project, at least on the UNDP side. And so for now, those people, those persons are designated as the administrator of the project. However, if you want someone from the ministry or from the government, you're more than welcome to consult with this person and let us know. And as we say, we can add another administrator or replace him or her. We just encourage you to have one person responsible for the project instead of several one for efficiency and responsibility reasons. We have another question also. Can you please show something on Bangladesh? Could we share this?
Yes, sure. I will just access the Bangladesh National Project. So let me connect to the UN Biodiversity Lab.
In the meantime, while Marion is preparing the project, we have another question from Ling asking, I am unclear as to what type of data to be uploaded. Could David or Antonio respond that, please?
Yes, I can, thanks. So all vector type data, let's say shape files, GeoJSON, KML files, GeoPackage can be uploaded within your national project by the person who will have the right to do so, and it is defined by the administrator. While all raster data cannot be automatically published within your national project, but can be demanded to be published by MAPEX. So you just need to ask for support, and we will be happy to publish your raster data if you don't have a platform where those data can be stored and directly streamed into MAPEX. So vector data, you can directly do it, and it will be explained in the technical webinars in September. While raster data, you will ask for support and provide the data, and we'll do it for you.
And the reason for that is primarily that the raster data files are far more heavy, and they take a lot longer to potentially transfer, whereas the raster files are usually a lot more light, and so it's just a completely different size to the files. But what we plan to do, just to further clarify, is offer some guidance for each of the biodiversity targets, the 5 that we're supporting. You know, what are the relevant data sets that would be needed, and how do you actually then do the analysis to get the kind of action maps that you need for your 6th national report. So that kind of walkthrough and guidance is under development, and that could also help answer your question in terms of which national data sets do you need to be uploading.
Thank you, Marion. We see
Marion, yes, sorry, I was about to say if I can just jump in
sure.
to answer the question about Bangladesh. I just share my screen, and you can see right now you're in the UN Biodiversity Lab. I accessed the Bangladesh page here, and right now I'm showing on the screen the Aichi Biodiversity Target number 5 data. Just as an example, I activated the view ecoregion 2017, but for example, this is all the categories that you can activate. So if, for instance, you're interested in the, let's say, natural hazards in Bangladesh, sorry, the page is a bit slow because of the webinar technology. Sorry, the webinar technology is a bit heavy for running at the same time that the UN Biodiversity Lab. So for example, if you're interested in the category climate and carbon, you can just activate it, and then you have the list here of the datasets relevant in this category. Then if you would like to join your project, just click here, and then you will have the possibility to access your Bangladesh projects. Just waiting for the page to load. You see here, if I'm typing Bangladesh in the list of projects, I can just click on the project and it will send me back to the Bangladesh page. So for the moment, as I don't have any specific rights in the Bangladesh projects because I'm not part of the 6NR team or etc., I don't have any special rights, so I just see what everybody can see. But of course, you can upload your data and manage the roles inside your project. And I hope this answers the question.
Great, thank you. I hope that helps a bit. And as Marion said, you will have a slightly different, let's say, screen, since you will have more authorization that she does have at the moment. We also received a question from Papua New Guinea asking, are these country data available in the UN Biodiversity Lab cleared and approved by the countries, and I assume by the countries' governments?
I can answer that. So at the moment, the data sets that we are incorporating into the UN Biodiversity Lab, they are going through a UN-based peer review process, and we're selecting the best available data for each of these themes. That process does not have a formal government focal point in it. So this is our interpretation of best available data, and we're offering that to all the countries that are reporting to the CBD. But as I mentioned, it's not formal official national data. It's global data that we're making available. And so the hope is that you can access this global data and then upload some of the formal and official national data into this catalog, into this private workspace, where you can then analyze the combined data sets and determine, the best mapping outputs for your 6 national report. So our hope is that eventually every country will also populate the national project workspace with formal and official national data, and that you can then use all of this data in a combined way.
Thank you, David. I currently do not have... Sorry.
Just to say that for every data set, you can see the metadata for every data set, and you can see then the source, the data integrity, and basically you can determine if that data set is useful for your purposes or not. And this is a big debate amongst countries. Obviously, some countries are very happy to use international data that's gone through a UN process, and some countries only want to use national official data. The key thing for us is simply making the global data available. That's what we've been hearing time and time again, is that many countries simply don't know how to access global data, and they'd love to access it and analyze it and transform some of it into national data, but they don't know how. And so we're offering them the opportunity to do that, to offer this national data in these national workspaces, these private workspaces, so that it can be combined with formal data, and then the final status and action maps can be then derived.
Perfect. I currently do not have any additional questions. We still have a couple of minutes to address them. So if you have anything to ask our experts, please raise your hand or type the question. And if not, I think this would conclude the Q&A session. Last call. Okay. Then I assume you currently do not have any questions, and of course you can be in touch with the experts and the 6NR project team whenever you want, and we'll make sure that we respond to your request as soon as possible. And with concluding this Q&A session, I'd like to turn over Inga for the final comments on this session. Inga, over to you.
Thank you very much, Marion, and a big thanks to David and Marion for going through their quite detailed presentation, which I hope you all found useful. So as we wrap up, I'd like to extend a very warm thanks to everyone who attended the session. We really look forward to continued engagement with you as you begin to access and use to draw your attention to several key resources that can support you to use the UN Biodiversity Lab. So to start with, our team has produced a briefing note that you can use to share an overview of the UN Biodiversity Lab with colleagues, available in English, French, and Spanish. We're also producing a technical guidance to train you in analysis specific to each of the 5 Aichi Biodiversity targets that David discussed in his presentation. This will be released with the technical webinars in September. To support you to use the UN Biodiversity Lab, you can check out the frequently asked questions on the UN Biodiversity Lab website or contact us at support@unbiodiversitylab.org. Finally, we encourage you to also join our 3 in-depth technical trainings offered during September. So with your registration for this webinar, you are automatically registered for the additional training webinars. You will receive an email in your inbox the day of the webinar with a link to join the webinar. On Thursday, September 13th, we will show you how to upload and work with national data sets. And we had many questions related to this, so I'd encourage you to dial in specifically for that. On Tuesday, September 18th, we will show you how to use spatial data and maps to make conservation decisions. And finally, on Tuesday, September 25th, we will show you how to use story maps to communicate the value of biodiversity, which you can use in country or also with your international stakeholders. So as mentioned earlier, this is the first of many trainings, but success of this platform will be based on continued dialogue with you, the end users. We really look forward to building this relationship with you and also very much look forward to the feedback that we receive from you.
Thank you, Inga. I actually just want to clarify the last date of the last webinar. It's not going to be 25th September, but 2nd October. And actually, Marion, our presenter today, will hand this webinar and will show you how to create story maps. So not September 25th, but October 2nd. So thank you, Inga, and all of you who attended the webinar today. We will post a recording on the NBSAP Forum YouTube channel, on the NBSAP Forum, and all of the presentation will be shared with you, as well as the recording via email. We hope that you all enjoyed this session, and we wish you to have a nice day or evening, depending on where you are. And we look forward to your active engagement on the UN Biodiversity Lab. Thank you. This concludes the webinar.